25. Vaksakstalasparsa Rugna Mahendravaha Dante Ridambita Kakukjusa Utahasam Sadyo Subhisaha Vinisyati Darahatur Vispur Jitar Danusa Ucharato Disanye. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Okay, yes. When Ravana was engaged in the battle, the trunk of the elephant which carried the king of heaven, Indra, broke into pieces, having collided with the chest of Ravana. And the scattered broken parts illuminated all directions. Ravana therefore felt proud of his prowess and began to loiter in the midst of the fighting soldiers, thinking himself the conqueror of all directions. But his laughter, overtaken by joy, along with his very air of life, suddenly ceased with the tingling sound of the bow of Ramachandra, the personality of Godhead. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. However powerful a living being may be when he is condemned by God, no one can save him. And similarly, however weak one may be, if he is protected by the Lord, no one can annihilate him. In Hindi they say, Raki Krishna Mare Ki, Mare Krishna Raki Ki. If Krishna wants to protect you, no one can kill you. If Krishna wants to kill you, no one can protect you. Yeah. When Ravana was engaged in the battle, the trunk of the elephant which carried the king of heaven, Indra, broke into pieces, having collided with the chest of Ravana, and the scattered broken parts illuminated all directions. Ravana therefore felt proud of his prowess and began to loiter in the midst of the fighting soldiers, thinking himself the conqueror of all directions. But his laughter, overtaken by joy, along with his very air of life, suddenly ceased with the tingling sound of the bow of Ramachandra, the personality of Godhead. Gaura Premanandi, Haribol, Haribol. So we continue in the 9th canto, 10th chapter. Here's some more things about the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra. So, after the battle of Kurukshetra, of course, Lord Ramachandra returned to Ayodhya, and it was a very joyous, very auspicious, very uplifting experience for everyone, including Bharat, whose mother tried to make him take the place of Lord Ramachandra, but Bharat refused. And he, in a sense, was very upset with his mother, who caused caused Ramachandra to be ostracized from Ayodhya. But Bharat assumed the responsibility of managing the kingdom of Ayodhya, which spread all over the world. But he refused to sit on the throne, and he kept the chappals of Lord Ramachandra on the throne. He himself had matted hair, and he wore a deer skin as if he was living in the jungle. And he slept on the floor, and he never assumed or thought of himself as the king. He always considered himself the servant of Lord Ramachandra, and he waited patiently for the Lord's return. And he was the most happiest person when the Lord returned. And to greet Lord Ramachandra, he put the chappals on his head and went to greet the Lord and offered his obeisances to the Lord. So we see there are very few people in the history of the world like Bharata. Why? Because he never entertained for 1 second the fact that he could replace the Lord. So now we can compare, we fast forward to modern times, and we see there is the son of Aurangzeb, the son of Sajihan, who was the son of King, who was the son of the emperor. What was his name? No. His name was. Anyway, I'll think of it. He was the same. He was a Muslim, but he was very favorable to Hindus. Akbar, yeah. His father was Akbar. So, one time, a man wrote a book in India. He entitled it Shahjahan, but the whole book was about his son Aurangzeb. So when he had his book signing, the people asked him a question. He said, "Hey, how come you named it Shahjahan when the whole book is about Aurangzeb?" He said, "Yeah, that's true, but I named it Shahjahan because he was one affected by Aurangzeb." So you see, you can never really. Oftentimes, it's difficult to figure out what a book is about until you actually ask the author, right? Otherwise, people start speculating and make up different theories. It's the same with the Srimad Bhagvatam, Bhagavad Gita. If you simply read it, you will not have a clear understanding of it. You'll have some understanding, but not a clear understanding. And there'll be many questions you'll have due to previous false things that you learned in schools and based on speculation. So to clear away all those false concepts due to listening to speculators, you need to hear it, hear the Bhagavatam spoken by, or Ramayana spoken by a genuine devotee, and you can ask questions to clear away all doubts. So it's not enough simply to read Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam. There's certainly a benefit in doing that, but it's not enough to really understand it. That's why, devotees never come to classes. They're basically functioning on things they heard in the early days before they were initiated. Because they wanted to get initiated, they came to the classes. But after they get initiated, many of them stop coming regularly to classes. Or they hear every once in a while a class here or there. But they don't take the hearing and chanting seriously. And therefore, they're functioning on something that they learned in their early days, and even there can be misconceptions, right? Therefore, if one remembers their vows at initiation, that will help sustain them, especially if they follow the vows. But if they don't follow the vows on top of everything else, then they're just initiated in name, not in substance. So here it says, so Prabhupada explains that the verse, 9th canto, 10th chapter, verse number 50. Being pleased by the full surrender and submission of Lord Bharata, Lord Ramachandra then accepted the throne of the state. He cared for the citizens exactly like a father, and the citizens, being fully engaged in their occupational duties of Varna and Ashrama, accepted him as their father. So this is a real leader. He's treating the praja, or the inhabitants of his kingdom, like a father treats a son or a daughter, with great affection and care and gentleness and kindness and full of compassion. So, purport by Srila Prabhupada. People are very fond of the pattern of Rama Raja. And even today, politicians sometimes form a party called Rama Raja. But unfortunately, they have no obedience to Lord Rama. He's talking about Gandhi and Nehru and all these phonies that claim that, when the British are gone, we're going to have Ram Raja here in India. But they ended up with Ravana Raja again, the two R's. So it is sometimes said that people want the kingdom of God without God. That's exactly what happened. They declared India a secular state. Is that right? and the Indians are proud of it. We have a secular state, you know. Yeah, we got rid of God, you know, and we just you know, make everything equal, you know, and we give special privileges to the minorities, you know, so they can teach their religion in their school. But Hindus are not allowed to teach religion in their schools. Right? And they can have more than one wife. Hindus are not allowed, although Hindus were allowed before. It was normal that Hindus would have 1, 2, 3, 4 wives. There's a joke about the uncle in Hindi. Uncles sometimes had 40 wives. To make a joke about that. Anyway, Lord Ramachandra established the principle of Ekapatni Vrat, that a high-class man will only have one wife and will remain faithful to her throughout his whole life, no matter what happens. And the same for the wife. She will remain faithful to her husband no matter what happens. In other words, there's no question of divorce. Even if the husband is cruel and mean, there's no question of divorce. In fact, we read at purport yesterday or the day before, even if the husband is cruel and mean, actually, that's good, because the wife does not have any illusion of being happy materially. Therefore, she completely depends on the mercy of the Lord. Or let's say the husband's a good guy and the wife is mean and cruel and speaks harsh words. That's actually good, because the husband has no hope for sense gratification in this life. Yeah. But of course, nowadays they get divorces right away and they find another victim for their sense gratification. But actually, these things are good, because you get trained right from the beginning that there's no hope for sense gratification or to please yourself, and therefore you take complete shelter of Krishna. So we can see that everything is topsy-turvy. Everything is misinterpreted, and good things, bad things are considered bad, good things are considered good, but actually bad things are good and good things are bad in the material sense, right? So we see it's impossible for people to understand Krishna consciousness unless they surrender to the Lord. So it says, such an aspiration, in other words, wanting the kingdom of God without God, however, is never to be fulfilled. Good government can exist when the relationship between the citizens and the government is like that exemplified by Lord Ramachandra and his citizens. Lord Ramachandra ruled his kingdom exactly as a father takes care of his children, and the citizens, being obliged to the good government of Lord Ramachandra, accepted the Lord as their father. Thus, the relationship between the citizens and the government should be exactly like that between father and son. When the sons in a family are well trained, they are obedient to the father and mother, and when the father is well qualified, he takes good care of the children. As indicated here by the words Swadharma Nirata Varnashrama Gunan Vita, the people were good citizens because they accepted the institution of Varna and Ashrama, which arranges society in the Varna divisions of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra, and the Ashrama divisions of Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. So see, this is a very important point. Why is that? Because what does the Varnashram Dharma system do? It regulates people's behavior based on Vedic culture. Culture means, actually, the real meaning of culture is how people do things. So if you're regulated according to Vedic culture, you bathe 2 or 3 times a day, you wake up very early, you take rest early, you chant your rounds, 16 good rounds early in the morning or throughout the day if you can, and you have darshan of the deities every morning, Mangala Arati, you hear the class, ask questions, and you get your vaccination. like that, but right through the ear into the brain, not through the arm into the vein, right? You get that vaccination against Maya every day, see, and we need it because every day we're prone to be attacked by Maya. Maya's always waiting for a little slip up to catch you, right? A little bit of negligence or inattention, whoops, she's right there, right? So because she never gives up. But if you're completely dedicated to Krishna, then she leaves you alone because she doesn't have any space to function. Right? So Ramachandra ruled his kingdom exactly as the father takes care of his children, and the citizens, being obliged to the good government of Lord Ramachandra, accepted the Lord as their father. Thus, the relationship between the citizens and the government should be exactly like that between father and son. When the sons, father and son, or father and daughter, when the sons in a family are well trained, they are obedient to the father and mother, and when the father is well qualified, he takes good care of the children. So this obedience is extremely important. Disciple comes from the word discipline. So one becomes a disciple when they accept the discipline of the guru. And the guru is simply a representative of Krishna. Whatever Krishna has said, that's what the guru repeats. He doesn't extrapolate anything. He doesn't add. He doesn't subtract. He gives it as it is. So whatever you're hearing from the bona fide guru is exactly what Krishna said himself in Bhagavad Gita. That's the sign that someone is a bona fide guru. They repeat. They don't speculate. They don't extrapolate. They don't add something. They don't reject anything. So, what do the Mayavadis do? They reject everything. There's total negation of everything. Say, that's why their philosophy is Mayavad. They're worshiping something that is illusory because they negated everything. See, that's the ultimate cancel culture is Mayavad philosophy. They negate Goloka. They negate Vaikuntha. They negate Narayana. They negate Krishna. They negate Nanda Maharaj. They negate the Surabi cows. They negate everything. They negate the material world. They negate the material world. They negate the spiritual world. And they talk about this light, the Brahma Jyoti. Well, the only place where there's no devotional service is in the Brahma Jyoti. Someone can engage in devotional service even in hell. And obviously in the spiritual world, in Vaikuntha and Goloka, but there's no devotional service in the Brahma Jyoti because everyone has denied their individuality in order to think that they're one with God. But actually, they're far away from God by that philosophy. So the whole thing is an illusion for them. They think the one thing they think is reality is actually an illusion for them. So this is actual human civilization. People must be trained according to the different varnashrama occupational duties, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.13, Shatavarnya Mayasristam Gunakarma Vibhagasaha. The four varnas must be established according to varying qualities and work, not according to birth. The first principle for good government is that it must institute this varnashram system. The purpose of varnashrama is to enable people to become God-conscious. So what did the communists do? They tried to eliminate all the varnas and ashramas that were naturally existing, and they failed. What are they trying to do today? What are the Democrats trying to do? They're trying to eliminate. They say everyone must be on the same level. In every class there should be kids that are slow learners and high achievers. You can't just separate them so that everyone is equal. You can't make everyone equal. Everyone is not equal. Everyone has different karma from previous life. How can they all be equal? See, so therefore, it's a downward spiral. This false sense of equality. The real equality is everyone is the eternal servant of Krishna. That's equality right there. And everyone can be trained to become pure in their service for Krishna. Even the lowest class person can be trained. If Narada Muni was able to train, Magari, the hunter, and before that, the author of the autobiography of Lord Ramachandra Valmiki. So that proves that there is equality, but it's on the spiritual level, it's not on the material level, right? No matter what one's disqualifications are materially, they can be wiped away. They can be, in a sense, purified, and one can become a devotee. And it doesn't matter whether you're intelligent, whether you can read or you can't read. Like Gorkishore Babaji, he couldn't read. He was so-called illiterate, but he was a top-flight devotee, and therefore Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur surrendered to him, although he was highly educated, right? But Gorkishore Babaji had something that was much greater than mundane education, and that was pure love for Krishna. So that's where the equality is. It's not on the material level, it's on the spiritual level. So the purpose of Varnashrama is to enable people to become God conscious. Varnashrama Charavata Purushena Parak Pumam Vishnur Aradyate. The entire Varnashram system is intended to enable people to become Vaishnavas. Vishnur Asya Devata. When the people worship Lord Vishnu as the Supreme Lord, they become Vaishnavas. Thus, people should be trained to become Vaishnavas through the system of Varna and Ashrama, as they were during the reign of Lord Ramachandra, when everyone was fully trained to follow the Varnashrama principles. Simply enforcing laws and ordinances cannot make citizens obedient and lawful. Well, that's what they do now. They just come up with new laws. They say, a Chinese person was beaten up by another person. They never say it's the black guy that beat him up, because that would not fit into their narrative. So, although it was a black person that beat up the Chinese guy, they don't say that in the newspaper, because it doesn't fit their narrative. So what happens? They pass a new law. They say nobody can beat up a Chinese person. Did that stop people from doing it? No, it doesn't stop anyone from doing it. Just because you're going to punish them, they don't care anything about the law, right? So that is impossible, Prabhupada says. Simply enforcing laws and ordinances cannot make the citizens obedient and lawful. That is impossible. Throughout the entire world, there are so many states, legislative assemblies, and parliaments, but still the citizens are rogues and thieves. Good citizenship, therefore, cannot be enforced. The citizens must be trained. As there are schools and colleges to train students to become chemical engineers, lawyers, or specialists in many other departments of knowledge, there must be schools and colleges to train students to become brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Sudras, brahmacharis, grihastas, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis. Well, that's why Prabhupada started temples. Usually, pure devotees don't build temples. But in order to train people properly in this age of Kali, temple is also necessary, if the temple is functioning as a real temple. The whole idea is to train people to become devotees. Some people naturally have a penchant to be Sudra-like. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. They're also part of the Varnashram system. The Sudras, the Vaishyas, the Kshatriyas, and the Brahmanas, they should all participate and work cooperatively. That's the thing. The spiritual world, people work cooperatively. The material world, due to lust, anger, greed, they don't cooperate with each other. Does everyone cooperate with each other in Microsoft? Huh? No. Although the Microsoft is trying to teach them always they should cooperate, you should be a team leader, you should be a team player, and so forth. It's the whole thing is the team. Everyone has to cooperate. But people have their own agendas also. Right? So, therefore, this will provide the preliminary condition for good citizenship, Varnashrama Guna Vita. Generally speaking, if the king or president is a Rajarsi, the relationship between the citizens and the chief executive will be clear. And Rajarsi means a saintly king. He's a Rishi and a Raja, right? And there will be no possibility of disruption in the state because the number of thieves and rogues will decrease. In Kali Yuga, however, because the Varnashram system is neglected, people are generally thieves and rogues. In the system of democracy, such thieves and rogues naturally collect money from other thieves and rogues, and thus there is chaos in every government, and no one is happy. But here the example of good government is to be found in the reign of Lord Ramachandra. If people follow this example, there will be good government all over the world. Well, India, the place of Lord Ramachandra, the place of Krishna, they said they wanted Ram Raja. But how can they create Ram Raja when Gandhi himself was not a devotee? He was a sadhu in a sense. He dressed like a sadhu, he looked like a sadhu, but he was actually a politician. And therefore, but he was not a good politician because he was a coward. You can't be a good politician if you're a coward. So what does he do? He makes a whole mess of the whole thing. And then he becomes replaced by Nehru, who's even worse, right? He's the epitome of the Western atheist. And he just completely ruined India and trying to wipe out the culture of Varnashrama. So when it says Varnashrama, it said you worship Lord Vishnu. But when you become purified, then you worship Krishna himself. Is there a difference between Vishnu and Krishna? No, but the functions are a little bit different. I say so. Krishna is functioning on a level of unfeathered love and devotion, without pomp and without, let's say, being awed by God. One becomes intimate with God. Right? You can't become intimate in Vaikuntha, but you can become very intimate in Goloka. So, but one cannot jump to that position artificially. So one has to be trained first and purified. And when one becomes completely purified and they actually develop pure love for God, then it becomes intimate. And all the rules and regulations are not followed anymore because one has unalloyed love for the Lord. But what people want to do is, before they're purified, they want to get rid of the rules and regulations. So, yesterday we discussed why people, even in ISKCON, want to change Prabhupada's books and eliminate a whole series of statements about women and this thing and that thing. And if you start eliminating all the statements about women, you're going to eliminate about one, I would say, 1/4 of the of what's in the Bhagavatam, because all over the Bhagavatam he writes things about the relationship of men and women. The whole Bhagavatam itself, 3/4 of it is about the relationship between men and women. You're going to have to erase all of that, to expunge what people find to be offensive. It's not offensive. It's a chance to preach, see, because it's offensive to people who are in Maya. But when you preach to them and get them out of Maya, they realize, wait a minute, this is the truth. There is such a thing. Whenever there's so-called negative statements about women in the Bhagavatam, or in Prabhupada's purports, he's talking about prostitutes. He's talking about fallen women. Just like when there's statements that seem to be prejudicial towards Sudras and of course Malechas and Yavanas and things. These are fallen people. They're not people who are following the rules and regulations. A symptom of low-class person is they're not regulated in their behavior. Therefore, they're unpredictable. Just like if you don't take drugs and you have a relatively clean life, let's say, style, you're usually well-behaved, usually clean, usually respectful. When you're unregulated and don't bathe all the time and don't follow all the rules, you become a low-class rogue, and you're unpredictable. When people are regulated, they're predictable. When they're rogues, they're unpredictable. One day they're nice, next day they can be like a criminal and kill you, you see. So this is the problem with unregulated people and people who don't have culture. Culture regulates people to act in predictable ways, right? But the culture of the demons is not to be predictable, not to be regulated, not to follow rules and regulations based on Krishna's statements, and they follow the rules and regulations established by the demons, right? And which are non-rules and non-regulations. So, and the next verse says, Lord Ramachandra became king during Treta Yuga, but because of his good government, the age was like Satya Yuga. Everyone was religious and completely happy. So that's just Ram Raja. Everyone is happy. So if you go to a temple and people are always arguing and complaining, there's something wrong. Because if there's good management, everyone will be happy and full of enjoyment and full of enthusiasm, right? Among the 4 yugas, Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali, the Kali Yuga is the worst. But if the process of Varnashram Dharma is introduced, even in this age of Kali, the situation of Satya Yuga can be invoked. The Hare Krishna movement, or the Krishna consciousness movement, is meant for this purpose. Kalir dosa nide rajan astihi ekamad guna kirtanadeva Krishna sya mukta sangha parambraja. My dear king, although Kali Yuga is full of faults, there is still one good quality about this age. Simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, one can become free from material bondage and be promoted to the transcendental kingdom. So if people take to this Sankirtan movement of chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, they will certainly be freed from the contamination of Kali Yuga, and the people of this age will be happy as people were in Satya Yuga. So that's our philosophy, and we'll continue this tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagvatam Grantaraj ki jai, Gaura Premanandi, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Shri Guru Charana Padma, Shri Guru Charana Padma, Kevala Bhakati Satma. Vando Mui Savadana Mate. Mando Mui Savadana Mate.
Mando Mui Savadana Mate.
Janara Prasade Bhai E Bhavatoriya Jai.
Janara Prasade Bhai E Bhavatoriya Jai.
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite.
Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoite.
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite.
Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoite.
Guru Mukha Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitit Goriya Kya.
Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Goriya Kya.
Arana Koriya Maneya Sa.
Arna Kori Ho Mone Asa.
Arana Koriya Maneya Sa.
Arna Kori Ho Mone Asa.
Shri Guru Charane Rati Ese Uttama Gati.
Guru Charane
Krishna Prabhi Ho He Prasade Oya Oite He Prasade Gure Sarva Oite Krishna Prabhi Oya Oite Chakshudana Dila Jai Janme Janme Prabhu Se Chakshudana Dila Jai Janme Janme Prabhu Se Divya Ganirde Prakasita Divya Ganirde Prakasita Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasahajate Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasahajate Vede Gajanara Charito Vede Gajanara Charito Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu Lokenat Lokera Jivana Lokenat Lokera Jivana Ha ha Prabhu Koradaya Deha More Padachaya Ha ha Prabhu Koradaya Deha More Padachaya Ebe Asutu Sukti Bhuvana Ebe Asutu Sukti Bhuvana Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Sama Om Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prestaya Mutare. Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gora Haribo, Haribo, Gora Haribo, Nitai Gora Haribo, Nitai Gora. Nitai Gora Premanandi Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramansa Pararajagachasta Tarasatara Shri Shrimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Shikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Shri Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guru. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavana Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutali Samata Bhakti Vinata Samanta. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Kuchani Devi Sesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Dizitana Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic emanates, by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures
all over the three worlds.